Nobody saw me find it, the young man said, his voice barely above a whisper, his hands shaking as he set the wallet down on the table in front of 6 men who looked like they could break him in half without blinking. But I would have known what I did. Raymond Mercer stared at the wallet. Then he looked up at the kid, standing there, hollow cheeks, cracked lips, a backpack that had seen better years, and something shifted behind his eyes. Every dollar was still inside. If you've ever had to choose between your character and your survival, this story is going to hit you somewhere deep. Subscribe to our channel right now and follow Noah's journey all the way to the end and drop a comment telling us what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wallet was sitting in the dark, half buried under a thin crust of overnight frost, wedged beneath the rear tire of a Harley that had been parked there since before midnight. Noah Bennett almost missed it. He was moving fast. The way you move when the cold has stopped feeling like cold and started feeling like something personal, something that wants to get inside you and stay there. His fingers were numb inside his single pair of gloves, the left thumb split open at the seam, and he was working the strip of parking lot behind the Silver Spur Diner because the dumpster near the kitchen door usually had something worth salvaging, and the aluminum cans along the curb could add up to enough for a cup of coffee if he found enough of them. It was 5:40 in the morning. He hadn't eaten since 2 the previous afternoon, half a ham sandwich someone had left on top of a trash can outside the gas station on Rourke Street, still in its wrapper, still good. He had $7 in his front pocket. His phone had been dead for 31 hours. The shelter on Alderman had given him a 2-week temporary placement that was expiring in 4 days, and the waiting list for the next available bed was 6 weeks long at minimum. He wasn't panicking. That was one of the things about Noah Bennett that people who met him later would remember, that he had a way of absorbing bad information without letting it flatten. He processed it, filed it, kept moving. His mother had called it engineering brain. She meant it as a compliment. She said he was always looking for the load-bearing problem, the one thing that, if you fixed it, made the other things manageable. Right now, the load-bearing problem was food, and he was solving it the only way available to him. He almost stepped over the wallet. It was thick and black, the kind made from good leather that gets better with age, and it was heavy enough that when his foot nudged it, he thought for a second he'd kicked a stone. He stopped, crouched down, picked it up, and the weight of it told him immediately that this was not an empty wallet, not a decoy, not something someone had already cleaned out and tossed away. He stood up and looked around the parking lot. There was no one. The diner wouldn't open for another 20 minutes. The street light at the far corner was doing its best, but not doing much. The only sound was the wind coming off the highway, over past 2 blocks east, and the distant rhythm of a semi pulling out of the truck stop on Route 9. He opened the wallet. The cash was folded in a thick band, all hundreds and fifties, layered in, tight and organized the way someone organized money when they respected it. He didn't count it right there. He could see enough to know it was more money than he had seen in one place in a long time. Maybe ever, if he was being honest with himself. There were bank cards, 2 of them, one Visa and one from a credit union he didn't recognize. There was a driver's license behind a clear plastic window. Raymond Mercer, the license said. The photo showed a man in his late 50s with a beard gone mostly silver and eyes that were calm in the particular way that men get calm when they have stopped needing to prove anything to anyone. And behind the license, folded twice, was a photograph. It was worn at the edges, the kind of worn that happens from being handled often, from being taken out and looked at and put back again over the course of years. It showed 2 standing beside a motorcycle, arms over each other's shoulders, both of them younger by decades. One of them was recognizably Raymond Mercer. The other man, the one with the same jawline and the same steady eyes, had a small cross drawn in marker in the corner of the photo. Someone had written a date beneath it and the words, Daniel, always. Noah stood in the cold parking lot for a long time. He counted the money, $6,820. He stood there and he let the number sit in his chest, and he felt what it meant, not abstractly. not as a concept, but as a physical reality. $6,800 was a motel room for 2 months, or close to it. It was a winter coat and 2 pairs of boots, and enough food that he wouldn't be counting calories for weeks. It was the deposit on a room somewhere decent, somewhere with a door he could lock, somewhere he could plug in a phone charger and sit at a table and think about what came next without the pressure of the cold making every thought feel like it was moving through mud. It was a way out of the specific kind of suffering he was living inside right now. No camera covered that corner of the lot. He had noted that automatically, the way he noted things, not because he was planning something, but because his brain cataloged details as a reflex. Nobody was watching. Nobody had seen him pick it up. The motorcycle it had rested under belonged to somebody who had walked away from it hours ago and hadn't come back yet, which meant whoever Raymond Mercer was, he either didn't know he'd lost it or he hadn't gotten here yet to look. Noah reached into the wallet and pulled out one of the $50 bills. He held it between his fingers and looked at it for a long moment. Then he thought about his mother. Patricia Bennett had worked double shifts at a hospital laundry facility for 11 years. She had raised Noah and his older sister Lauren in a 2-bedroom apartment that was never quite warm enough in January and never quite cool enough in July. And she had done it without ever once making them feel like they were lacking anything that mattered. She had a saying that she repeated so often it had become the architecture of Noah's conscience. Poverty can take your comfort and your opportunities and your time and your sleep, but it cannot take your character. The only way it gets your character is if you hand it over. He thought about her saying that. He thought about handing it over. He put the 50 back. He closed the wallet. He picked up his bag and he walked toward the entrance of the Silver Spur diner, and he pushed open the door. The warmth hit him first. Then the smell of coffee and bacon grease and something sweet, maybe cinnamon rolls, and then his eyes adjusted and he saw them. 6 men, seated at the long booth along the back wall, the kind of booth that restaurants keep for large parties, except these men had clearly claimed it as something closer to territory. They were bikers, not the costume and weekend ride variety, but the kind who had lived inside that world long enough that it had settled into their posture, their silence, the way they took up space. Leather vests, patches, the kind of boots that had seen serious road. Most of them were somewhere between 50 and 65. A couple were younger. All of them had the unhurried attention of men who were used to reading situations quickly and deciding in seconds how they felt about them. They all looked at Noah the moment he walked in. He didn't stop walking. The waitress behind the counter, mid-40s, dark hair, a name tag that said Maggie, though she would later tell him the diner was named after her grandmother, and not her, started to say something, probably to ask him what he needed. But Noah was already halfway to the booth, and something in his face or his walk, or maybe just the fact that he was a skinny 20-year-old in a split glove, moving with absolute intention towards 6 bikers at 5:40 in the morning, made her hold off. He stopped at the edge of the table. The man matching the driver's license photo, Raymond Mercer, silver beard, calm eyes, was seated at the center. He had a coffee cup in front of him, and he was in something to the man on his left when he registered Noah of standing there, and he stopped talking. Everyone stopped. "I'm looking for Raymond Mercer," Noah said. His voice came out steadier than he expected. Ray looked at him for a moment with no expression. "You found him." Noah reached into his jacket, pulled out the wallet, and placed it flat on the table in front of Ray. "I found this in the parking lot," he said. "Under your motorcycle, I think. The one with the Ohio plate." Nobody at the table moved. Ray looked at the wallet. He looked at Noah. He picked up the wallet and opened it and looked inside. He took out the cash, still bundled, and counted it with the practiced speed of someone who had done a lot of counting in his life. He put it back. He checked the cards. He checked the license. He checked the photograph. And when he did, something moved across his face fast. Controlled, but real. He looked up at Noah. "How much did you take?" "Nothing." One of the other men at the table, heavyset, a beard that had more red in it than gray, a patch on his vest that said road, Captain made a sound that wasn't quite a laugh. Kid comes in here at 6 in the morning with that much cash in his hand, and he's going to tell us. Carl, Ray said quietly. Just the name. Carl went quiet. Ray looked at Noah again. The parking lot has no cameras on that east corner. I know because I parked there on purpose. He paused. So nobody saw you. Nobody saw me find it, Noah said. But I would have known what I did. The table was silent for a moment that felt longer than it was. Ray sat back. He studied Noah the way someone studies a map when they're not sure whether to trust the road it's showing them. Then he nodded once, slowly, and gestured at the empty seat across from him. Sit down, he said. Before you fall down. Noah sat. The waitress appeared, and Ray ordered, without asking, eggs, toast, orange juice, and a full coffee for Noah. And when Noah started to say he didn't need. You didn't ask for charity, Ray said, cutting him off without sharpness. You sat down because I told you to. Breakfast is what I'm telling you to have next. Drink the juice. Noah drank the juice. It tasted unbelievably good. He hadn't had orange juice in 3 months. Ray introduced the men at the table without ceremony. Carl was road captain for the chapter. The older man with the reading glasses and the quiet demeanor was Leon Briggs, retired. The 2 younger men were prospects named Garrett and Dev. The man with the sleeve tattoos was Wade, who Ray described as the best motorcycle mechanic in the eastern half of the state. Wade nodded at Noah and went back to his coffee. That was apparently all Wade needed to do to agree with any description of himself. Ray asked Noah questions. Not probing, not suspicious, direct questions. The kind someone asks when they actually want the information. How long? What happened? What does he do? Noah answered honestly, which meant he gave the real version, not the softened version he had learned to give to social workers and shelter administrators. He had been out of stable housing for 8 months. He'd been studying automotive engineering at a community college when his mother died, and the financial aid collapsed along with everything else. He had no family in the state. Lauren was in Portland, and they hadn't spoken much since things got bad, which was his fault, and he knew it was his fault. He had worked 3 jobs between losing his apartment and losing the engineering program, and somehow losing all 3 jobs inside a 6-week period that he still didn't entirely understand. He talked about it without self-pity, which was the thing Ray kept noticing. The kid laid out facts the way someone lays out a broken engine. Here are the parts. Here is where each one failed. Here is the sequence of failures that produced the current condition. You study engines, Ray said. I study them past tense because you're not in school, not because you stopped understanding them. Noah looked at him. Right. Ray glanced at the window, at his motorcycle parked outside. Tell me what's wrong with the bike on the end. The blue one. Don't go outside. Just tell me what you can see from here. Noah looked through the window. He was quiet for a moment. The front fork seal on the right side is leaking. You can see the stain on the lower leg. And the rear tire's wearing on the inside edge, which usually means the rear suspension is set too soft for the rider's weight, or the tire pressure's been chronically low. And nobody caught it. Wade set down his coffee cup. Ray looked at Wade. Wade picked his coffee cup back up. He's right, he said. Breakfast arrived, and Noah ate with the controlled discipline of someone who had learned that eating too fast when you haven't eaten enough makes everything worse. But underneath that discipline, he was so hungry that every bite required actual effort to slow down. Nobody at the table commented on it. Ray talked to Carl about something unrelated, giving Noah the dignity of space, and the other men fell into their own conversations. When the plates were mostly cleared, Ray leaned forward. The wallet, he said, that money had a purpose. It wasn't walking around cash. He paused. My brother Daniel died 14 months ago. The ride we're organizing this weekend is in his name a memorial run. Couple hundred members from 3 chapters. The cash was for the event fund. I don't usually carry it like that. He stopped. I was careless. I'm sorry about your brother, Noah said. Ray was quiet for a moment. You didn't have to return it. I know. Most people in your position, most people in my position, Noah said. And there was an edge in his voice that surprised him. Not anger exactly. Something more like exhaustion. I'm not most people. I'm me, and I know what I would have had to live with. Ray looked at him for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and took out a business card, plain white. Name, phone number, and below that, in small print, Mercer Roadside Recovery. He slid it across the table. I'm not going to hand you a pile of cash, Ray said. I think you'd probably refuse it, and I think you'd be right too. But if survival turns into a dead end, you call that number. He paused. Asking for a door isn't the same as asking to be carried through it. Noah looked at the card. He picked it up and put it in his shirt pocket, close to where his mother's photograph used to be before his phone died, and he couldn't look at it digitally. And the print had worn so thin he'd stopped taking it out for fear of losing it. Thank you for breakfast, he said. Thank you for the wallet, Ray said. Noah stood, shouldered his backpack, and walked toward the door. He was almost there when Ray called after him. Hey. Noah turned. What's your name? Noah Bennett. Ray nodded like he was filing it somewhere specific. Take care of yourself, Noah Bennett. Outside, the cold hit him again. He stood on the sidewalk and pulled his jacket closed and looked at the parking lot, the motorcycles, the thin strip of frost where the wallet had been. He thought about the $50 bill. He thought about what it would have bought. He thought about how easy it would have been, how completely untraceable, how the math of the situation had seemed almost to be arguing in favor of taking it. His hands were shaking. He put them in his pockets and told himself it was the cold. He had 4 days left in his shelter placement, $7 in his pocket, a dead phone and a business card and a breakfast that was already doing the thing food does when your body has been running on empty, warming him from the inside out, making the world feel very slightly less like a system designed to grind him down. He started walking. He promised himself he would never use that card. He told himself that giving it back had been the right thing, and that right things didn't require follow-up rewards, and that a good action didn't become good because of what it produced. It was good because of what it was. And he believed all of that. He believed every word of it, the same way his mother had believed it and had taught him to believe it. He believed it so completely that he didn't notice, for the first 3 blocks, that he was still shaking, not from the cold, from how close it had been, from standing at the edge of something he couldn't come back from and stepping away from it in the dark with nobody watching. Nobody to tell him he'd done the right thing. Nobody to confirm that the choice he made was worth anything at all. He kept walking. The city opened up around him, gray and busy and utterly indifferent, and Noah Bennett moved through it with a straight back and his mother's voice in his ears and a business card in his pocket that he was absolutely, definitely, under no circumstances ever going to use. 3 days later, everything fell apart. He kept that promise for exactly 72 hours. 3 days after walking out of the Silver Spur diner, Noah was sitting on his bunk in the Alderman Street shelter, lacing his boots for the 3rd time because it gave his hands something to do, when Caleb Voss sat down across from him and smiled, the kind of smile that has nothing friendly in it. Caleb was 24, broad across the shoulders, with the particular confidence of someone who had learned early that being large and unpredictable gave him advantages that other people had to earn. He'd been at the shelter longer than most 8 weeks, which was unusual, which meant he knew how to work the system in ways Noah hadn't figured out yet. He had friends among the staff, or at least people who thought they were his friends. He knew which administrators came in late on Thursdays and which counselor left her office unlocked during lunch. Noah had noticed all of this without trying to. Engineering brain. Saw you the other morning, Caleb said. He kept his voice low. Conversational. The way you talk, when you don't want the room to hear you, but you want the person in front of you to feel the weight of every word. Parking lot behind the Silver Spur. Early. Cold morning. Noah kept lacing his boot. Okay, found something, didn't you? It wasn't a question. Noah looked up. Caleb leaned forward with his elbows on his knees, and the smile stayed exactly where it was. I was in the alley, cutting through. Saw you pick it up, saw you stand there a while. Saw you go inside. He paused, saw those bikers in there. Big guys, serious guys. Then you saw me give it back, Noah said. I saw you go inside, Caleb said. I didn't see what you gave back or what you kept. Noah looked at him steadily. There was $6,800 in that wallet. I gave back every dollar. Caleb tilted his head. See, that's a lot of money to walk away from. Man like that, biker, carrying that kind of cash, he's not going to count it down to his last bill in front of a crowd. He takes one look, sees the big number. He's satisfied. He spread his hands. What I'm thinking is, a smart guy, not a stupid guy. A smart guy could have kept a few hundred. Maybe 5. Maybe closer to 8. Nobody checks that close. I didn't keep anything, Noah said. I'm thinking you kept something. You're wrong. Caleb nodded slowly, like Noah had said something interesting, rather than something simple and true. Here's where I'm at, he said. I need $500. I need it by Friday. And the way I see it, you're a young man who recently came into some good fortune and sharing fortune with a neighbor who's been looking out for you. Seems like the kind of thing a smart person does. No. Noah put his foot down on the floor. He looked at Caleb directly. I returned the wallet. All of it. I don't have $500. I have $7 in change. If you saw me in that parking lot, you know what I look like, which means you know I'm not hiding a stack of bills somewhere. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe you're smarter than you look and you put it somewhere I can't see. He stood up, slowly, making sure the motion communicated everything it was supposed to communicate. I'm going to give you until Friday to think about it. That's generous. You think about what it costs you if I go to the staff here and tell them you picked up a stolen wallet from a biker gang and only returned it after they caught you inside the diner. Think about what that does to your placement. Think about what it does to your record. He smiled again. Friday, Noah. Be smart. He walked away. Noah sat completely still for a long moment. Then he reached under his mattress and checked that his backpack was still there. It was. He unzipped the main pocket and looked at what he had. His engineering notebooks, 3 of them, filled front to back with his own handwriting, diagrams, calculations, notes from 2 years of coursework that he couldn't afford to replace. His mother's last photograph, the printed one. 2 reference letters from former employers, sealed, which he hadn't found a reason to use yet, but carried because the day might come. His identification, his shelter paperwork, everything he owned that couldn't be replaced. He zipped the bag back up and sat there and made himself think clearly. Caleb's leverage was a lie. That was the first fact. The second fact was that a lie told convincingly to the right people could do the same damage as the truth. The third fact was that Noah had no way to prove what had happened in that parking lot except by calling Ray Mercer, and he had promised himself he wasn't going to do that. He lay back on his bunk and stared at the ceiling and thought about his mother's other, saying, the one she used less often because it was harder. Sometimes doing the right thing isn't enough. Sometimes you also have to survive it. He fell asleep with his backpack against his chest. He didn't sleep well. He was up before the shelter's wake call, moving through the morning routine on autopilot bathroom. Face, boots, bag already calculating. He'd spent most of the night working the problem the way he worked engineering problems. Isolate the variables, identify which ones you can control, focus there. What he could control, he could document what had actually happened. He could talk to Maggie at the diner, see if she remembered him. He could try to find Ray and ask him to confirm the story. What he couldn't control, whether Caleb moved first, whether the shelter staff believed him over a longer-term resident, whether any of it mattered in the 48 hours before his placement expired anyway. He spent Thursday working the neighborhood cans, odd jobs, anything. He helped a man carry boxes out of a moving truck for 2 hours and made $15. He found a gas station that needed the lot swept and made 8 more. He called the engineering placement office at the community college from a payphone, which cost him $1.50, and confirmed that his application for the spring readmission program was still pending, but that they needed updated proof of address, which he didn't have. He came back to the shelter Thursday evening, and his backpack was gone. Not moved, not misplaced, gone. The bunk had been stripped and remade, and his backpack, which he had left locked to the frame, with a carabiner through the strap, was nowhere. The carabiner was on the floor. It hadn't been cut. Someone had known the combination of 4-digit code he'd set himself, a date, his mother's birthday, or someone had simply had enough time and enough quiet to work through it. He went to the front desk. He kept his voice level. He explained what was missing. The administrator on duty, a man named Frank, who Noah had spoken to maybe twice before, looked at him with the expression of someone who has heard many versions of this story and trusts none of them. "We're not responsible for personal property," Frank said. "I understand that. I'm reporting a theft. You'll need to file with the police if you believe there was a theft." "My ID was in that bag," Noah said. "My shelter paperwork, my reference letters, everything." Frank looked at him. "I'm sorry to hear that." That was the end of the conversation. Noah stood outside Frank's office door and did the breathing his mother had taught him in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. And he thought about the fact that Caleb was sitting in the common room right now, probably watching TV, probably not thinking about Noah at all. Because to Caleb, this was business, not personal. He thought about the card in his shirt pocket. He didn't take it out yet. He was still at the shelter the following morning when Frank found him and told him there had been a complaint. A resident had reported to staff that Noah had been seen handling prescription bottles that didn't belong to him specifically, a bottle of controlled medication belonging to another resident that had gone missing from a shared bathroom cabinet. The resident who reported it, Frank said, had seen Noah near the cabinet. "Who reported it?" Noah asked. "I can't share that." "Was it Caleb Voss?" Frank's expression shifted just enough to answer the question without answering it. "The medication was found," Frank said, "in a search of your bunk area, in the pocket of a jacket beneath your mattress." Noah was very still. "I have never used controlled medication in my life. I don't own a jacket that I keep under my mattress. Whatever was found there was put there by someone else." "That's a serious allegation," Frank said. "What I'm telling you is the truth. We have a zero-tolerance policy." "I returned a wallet nearly $7,000 in it 3 days ago," Noah said. His voice was controlled, but it cost him. "I can give you the name of the man who owns the wallet. I can give you the name of the diner where it happened. I can give you the name of the waitress who was there. That is the kind of person I am. And if you think the kind of person who does, that would steal prescription medication from a shelter bathroom, then I cannot help you see something you've decided not to see." Frank looked at him for a long moment. There was something in his face that might have been uncertainty, or might have been sympathy, or might have been neither. "I have to follow procedure," he said. "I know," Noah said. He was out by noon. He stood on the sidewalk outside the alderman's shelter with nothing. Not nothing as a figure of speech, nothing as a literal accounting. No bag, no notebooks, no reference letters, no photograph of his mother. The $7 and change that had been in his front pocket when his bag was stolen. The clothes on his back, the boots on his feet, the card in his shirt pocket. The temperature had been dropping since noon. The forecast, he'd heard it on the radio in the shelter common room before Frank had found him, was calling for it to go below 20 overnight. He walked to Maggie's diner. He didn't ask for charity. He sat at the counter and ordered a coffee, $1.50, and asked Maggie, who turned out to actually be there and turned out to actually be the woman who had served him breakfast with Ray 3 days ago, whether she remembered him. She looked at him for a moment. "Skinny kid with the bikers," she said. "The one who gave back the wallet." "Yes, I remember you." She paused. "You look worse." "I've had a few days," he said. She refilled his coffee without charging him for it. He sat at the counter for an hour thinking. He thought about Lauren in Portland, who he hadn't called in 4 months, who had left 3 voicemails he hadn't returned. Because every time he thought about calling her back, he had to confront the fact that he had been too proud to let her help him when he first started falling, and now he was so far down that asking felt like it required an explanation he didn't know how to give. He thought about the engineering notebooks, filled with 2 years of his own thinking, irreplaceable. He thought about his mother's photograph, the one he'd been so careful with, and whether whoever had stolen the bag would understand what it was and leave it alone, or whether it was already gone. He thought about Caleb sitting in the shelter right now, comfortable, untouched. Then he stopped thinking about Caleb, because Caleb was a problem he couldn't solve tonight. And the problem he could solve tonight was where he was going to sleep when the temperature hit 20 degrees. He took the card out of his pocket. He looked at it for a long time. Then he went to the payphone at the end of the block and put in a quarter and dialed. It rang twice, Mercer Ray said. Noah took a breath. It's Noah Bennett. You gave me your card at the Silver Spur. A pause. I remember exactly who you are. Another pause. Shorter. Where are you? Maggie's Diner. I lost my shelter placement tonight. I lost my bag yesterday, ID, notebooks, everything. I don't... He stopped, started again. I told myself I wasn't going to call this number, but you called. The temperature's going below 20, Ray said. Don't move, and hung up. He arrived in 22 minutes, which meant he had been close, or he had driven fast, or both. He came alone, no crew, no backup, just Ray Mercer in a worn work jacket, pulling up to the curb in a truck that had seen serious mileage and parking it like he owned the block. He came inside and sat down next to Noah at the counter and ordered coffee. He didn't say anything immediately. Maggie brought 2 cups and left them alone. Ray looked at Noah, he said. All of it. So Noah did. He told it in the same way he'd told Ray his life story at the Silver Spur, sequentially, factually, without dressing it up. Caleb watching him in the parking lot. Caleb's assumption, the threat. His refusal. The stolen backpack. The planted medication. The expulsion. He told it flat and clean, without asking for anything from Ray's reaction, which was something Ray noticed. When Noah finished, Ray was quiet for a moment. You know what I want to do, Ray said. I have a guess. And I don't want that, Noah said. Caleb is a problem. But he paused, looking for the right word. I don't want him frightened into silence. I don't want him hurt. I want the truth to come out through a process that means something. He looked at Ray directly. I want the truth to matter, even when the person telling it doesn't have an address. Ray looked at him for a moment with an expression that was hard to read. Respect. Maybe, or something more complicated than respect. The particular feeling of recognize something in another person that you used to know in yourself. Leon Briggs, Ray said, finally. The man at the table at the Silver Spur. You remember him? Quiet. Reading glasses. Retired investigator. Spent 22 years doing it. He's going to find this Caleb Voss and find out what he actually is. Because I promise you it is more than one stolen backpack. Ray looked at his coffee. Can you tell me which shelter? Full name of the administrator? Noah gave him everything. Ray took out his phone and typed. Then he put his phone away. Tonight you're coming with me, he said. There's a room above the garage. It's not much. I can't. You're not accepting charity, Ray said. You're accepting a place to sleep that isn't a doorway in 20-degree weather. There's a difference between those two things. You can argue with me about it in the morning when you're not hypothermic. He stood up and left 2 20s on the counter, which was more than the coffee cost. Come on. Noah sat there for one more second. He thought about pride, which he had carried like armor for 8 months, which had kept him from calling Lauren, which had kept him from calling Ray, which had accomplished nothing except making his suffering a private performance for an audience of no one. He got up and followed Ray to the truck. The room above Mercer Roadside Recovery was exactly what Ray had said, not much. A cot, a space heater, a bathroom down the hall, shared with the garage's back office. But it was warm, and it was locked, and when Noah sat on the cot and felt the heat working through his jacket, he understood, on a physical level, what it meant to be safe. Not comfortable, not fixed, safe. Ray left him with a phone charger. Your phone's dead, I'm guessing, and a key to the room, and the information that the garage opened at 7 and that Noah could earn his stay by helping Wade, the mechanic, starting in the morning. Noah plugged in his phone. While it charged, he sat in the quiet, and he thought about his engineering notebooks, which were the closest thing he had to proof of who he actually was, not who he'd been reduced to, but who he was underneath all of it. He thought about starting them over. He had the knowledge. He had always had the knowledge. You couldn't steal what lived in someone's head. He thought about Caleb Voss. He didn't know, yet he had no way of knowing that Leon Briggs had already started making calls. That within 48 hours, Leon would pull a thread that connected Caleb to 7 other vulnerable people at 3 different shelters, a scheme involving confiscated identifications and fraudulent accounts that went back nearly a year. That the stolen backpack was not the first backpack, and the planted medication was not the first planted medication, and Noah had not been Caleb's first target. He had simply been the first target who had refused to disappear quietly. He didn't know any of that yet. What he knew was that he was warm, and that he had called the number, and that calling it had not broken anything he needed to keep intact. He thought about Ray's words at the Silver Spur, asking for a door isn't the same as asking to be carried through it. He was at the door. He hadn't asked anyone to carry him. He lay back on the cot and closed his eyes. And somewhere between thinking about his mother's photograph and thinking about the way the blue Harley's fork seal had left that specific streak of oil on the lower leg, he fell asleep. He slept for 9 hours without moving. In the morning, Wade knocked on the door at 7 sharp and said, without preamble or introduction, you know the difference between a wet sump and a dry sump lubrication system? Noah opened his eyes. Yes. Good, Wade said, because I've got a 9 Road King out here that's been misdiagnosed 3 times, and I'm not in the mood to explain the basics. He paused. Coffee's in the office. You've got 10 minutes. Noah was downstairs in 8. He didn't know yet that the garage would become the first place in over a year where the question asked of him each morning was not what do you need, but what do you know? He didn't know that Wade, who spoke approximately 40 words per hour and meant every single one of them, would become something like the teacher he hadn't known he needed. He didn't know that Leon Briggs was at that exact moment sitting across from a woman named Patricia Reyes, who had lost her identification to Caleb Voss 4 months ago and was willing, for the first time, to say so out loud. He didn't know any of it yet. He drank his coffee and went to look at the Road King. And when he crouched down beside it and put his hands on the engine casing and felt the familiar logic of it, the problem waiting to be found, the solution waiting to be worked out, something in his chest that had been clenched for 8 months loosened by exactly 1 degree. It wasn't recovery. It wasn't resolution. It was 1 degree. But 1 degree, when you've been cold long enough, is everything. And somewhere across the city, Caleb Voss was about to make his first serious mistake, the kind that doesn't come from being careless, the kind that comes from being so certain that the people beneath you have no power that you stop watching for what they might do when they finally find some. Leon Briggs didn't operate like a man in a hurry. He operated like a man who had spent 22 years understanding that the fastest way to get to the truth was to stop rushing toward it and start listening to the things people said when they thought nobody important was paying attention. He had made 3 calls the night Ray brought Noah to the garage. By the following morning, he had made 11 more. By the end of the 2nd day, he had a name, a pattern, and a meeting with a woman named Patricia Reyes, who had been afraid to talk to anyone for 4 months. Noah didn't know the full shape of what Leon was building. He knew Ray had set it in motion, and he knew Leon was serious about it, and that was enough. What Noah could control was what happened inside the garage, and so that's where he put his focus, which turned out to be exactly the right instinct, because Wade Holloway had about as much patience for distraction as he had for people who misdiagnosed a sump engine 3 times running. The Road King took them most of that first morning. Wade handed Noah tools without explaining what he wanted done, which was a test. Noah recognized it as a test because his first engineering professor had done the first same thing on the first day of lab, handing students components and watching to see who picked them up like they knew what they were holding. Noah held the tools correctly. He asked 1 question about the bike's service history, and then didn't ask another one for 2 hours, because the service history told him enough to work from. When he found the actual problem, not the oil leak, everyone had been chasing but a cracked primary chain tensioner that was causing the leak as a downstream effect, he didn't announce it. He just fixed it, documented it in the garage log, and moved to the next task. Wade watched him for a moment without speaking. Then he went to the coffee machine and came back with 2 cups and set one near Noah's elbow. That was, apparently, how Wade Holloway said well done. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Noah was under a touring bike doing a brake line inspection when Ray came into the garage fast, which was unusual enough that Noah rolled out from under the bike immediately. Ray's face was controlled, but there was something tight behind his eyes. The look of someone who has just received information that is bad but not surprising. "We have a problem," Ray said. "Police are here. They want to talk to you." Noah sat up. "About what?" "Customer files. Someone accessed our billing system 2 nights ago and pulled contact information for about 40 clients. Credit card numbers, addresses, phone records." Ray paused. "The access log shows it was done from the garage computer during a window when you were here alone." The silence in the garage was total. Even Wade, who had been grinding something at the back bench, had stopped. "Noah said I was here Tuesday night. I was doing inventory documentation. I didn't touch the billing system. I don't have the password for the billing system, and I've never asked for it." "I know that," Ray said. "Then I know that," Ray said again more quietly. "But the log shows your user session." Noah was still for a moment. Then he understood. "Someone used my session. I logged into the parts database Tuesday around 8. I walked away from the computer for 20 minutes. When that couple pulled in with the blown radiator hose, I went outside to help them. I left my session open." Ray looked at him. "Can you prove you were outside?" "The couple. They drove a white Subaru with Tennessee plates. I helped them add coolant and map the nearest shop that could do the repair that night. They thanked me. Maggie at the diner saw me walking them to their car. She was taking her break outside." Ray nodded once. Slowly, "Tell all of that to the investigators. Don't leave anything out. Don't guess at things you don't know. Just tell what you know." "I'm not going to run," Noah said. "I didn't think you were," Ray said. "I just needed to hear you say it." There were 2 investigators, not uniformed officers, plainclothes, county level, the kind of careful professionalism that meant this was already further along than a preliminary complaint. They interviewed Noah in Ray's office, with Ray present, and Noah did exactly what he'd told Ray he would do. He laid out the timeline without decoration. He told them about the Tennessee couple, the Subaru, the radiator hose, Maggie's diner, the time he'd left the computer, the time he'd come back. He told them that his user session for the parts database and the billing system used the same login credentials because the garage's system hadn't been segmented yet, a security gap he had actually noted in the documentation he'd been preparing. The investigator with the notebook, younger, thorough, the kind of thorough that was either very good or very dangerous, depending on which direction it went, looked up from his writing. "You noted a security vulnerability in the system?" "Yes, it's in the documentation log. Dated 3 days ago." The investigators exchanged a look. "We'll want to see that log," the younger one said. "It's on the same computer," Noah said. "The timestamp will be there." They checked. The timestamp was there. That wasn't enough to clear him. Noah understood that. A timestamp could be manipulated by someone who knew what they were doing, and they had no way of knowing yet whether Noah knew what he was doing in that specific direction. But it complicated the narrative. It introduced enough uncertainty that they shifted from treating him as a subject to treating him as a witness, which was a different thing entirely. And Noah felt the shift happen in real time and let himself breathe slightly. After the investigators left, Carl arrived at the garage with news that nobody had asked for, but everybody needed. 3 other chapter members had received texts from an unknown number overnight, texts that contained personal information, home addresses, in 2 cases, and a message telling them that the person responsible for the data breach was already known and already handled. Someone was trying to close a door before it could be opened. Ray read the text, Carl showed him, and said nothing for a long moment. Then he called Leon. Leon Briggs came to the garage that evening, and he brought what he'd built. He spread it on Ray's desk like a mechanic, spreading out the parts of a disassembled engine, each piece laid flat, Nothing overlapping, the relationships between components visible. Caleb Voss was not a man running a simple hustle. He was running something that had been operating for at least 11 months across 3 shelters in 2 counties. The mechanism was precise. Identify vulnerable residents with usable identification, create a reason to take the ID, sometimes theft, sometimes the planted contraband play he'd used on Noah, use the ID to open accounts, draw against them, close them, move on. He had done it to at least 9 people that Leon could confirm, probably more that hadn't surfaced yet. The stolen customer files from the garage, Leon said, matched the format of Caleb's other information lifts. He's not technically sophisticated, he had inside access on the others too. Someone who already had a login, someone he was working with or coercing. He paused. One of the shelter staff at Alderman, Frank Ray, was very still. Frank gave him access to residents' information. Leon continued. Caleb gave him a cut. Frank also flagged residents who were about to age out of their placement, the most vulnerable transition point. That's how Caleb identified Noah. Frank told him Noah was 3 days from losing his bed. Noah sat in the corner of the office and felt something cold move through him that had nothing to do with temperature. He thought about Frank's face when he told him about the wallet, about Caleb, about the planted medication. He thought about how Frank had looked at him with that expression that might have been sympathy or might have been something else. It had been something else. One of the victims, Leon said, is a woman named Sonia Graves, 41 years old. Caleb took her identification 8 months ago. She's been living without it since, can't get housing, can't work legally, can't access medical benefits. She's at a church shelter on Delaney Street right now, and she's agreed to give a statement. He paused. She agreed because she heard what Noah did. One of the other residents at Alderman told her about the wallet, about how Noah refused to run when Caleb came after him. Leon looked at Noah. She said if he was willing to stand still, she could try to do the same. The room was very quiet. Noah looked at the desk. He thought about Sonia Graves, who he had never met, deciding to testify because of a decision he'd made in a cold parking lot at 5:40 in the morning. He thought about how this connected to other things in ways you never saw while they were happening. Where is Caleb now? Ray asked. That's the problem, Leon said. Caleb had not been at the Alderman shelter since the morning after Noah's expulsion. He had a room at a weekly rate motel under a name that wasn't his. Leon had found it through the account trail, but he checked out 2 days ago. His phone had gone dark. The texts to the chapter members had been sent from a burner. And Sonia Graves had not shown up for her scheduled meeting with Leon that morning. Her caseworker at the church shelter said she'd left the previous evening to meet someone she trusted, someone who'd reached out to her, someone she thought could help her get her documents back. Leon put down his coffee cup. I think Caleb knows she's going to talk. The room moved fast after that. Ray was on his phone. Carl was already heading for the door. Noah stood up, and something in his memory snagged, not a dramatic revelation, just a detail, the kind of detail his brain collected without asking his permission. He'd seen a van 3 times in the past 4 days. Dirty white, older model, a cracked right taillight, parked at different distances from the garage, each time, but always on the same side of the street. He'd logged it without knowing why. There's a van, he said. White, cracked right taillight. I've seen it near the garage multiple times. I don't know what it is, but it doesn't belong here. Leon looked at him sharply. Make, model, late 90s Econoline. I wrote down the partial plate in the garage log. I log unusual vehicles near the shop. Just habit. He paused. I thought I was being paranoid. Leon was already moving toward the computer. The plate came back to a delivery company that had dissolved 18 months ago. The van had been sold at a private auction, and the transfer of title had never been properly recorded. A ghost vehicle. Leon cross-referenced the auction record and found the buyer a name that matched one of the fraudulent accounts Caleb had opened. He's been watching the garage, Leon said. He knew we were building something, Ray said. He needed to know how fast. And Sonia Noah started. He got to her first, Leon said. He's going to try to destroy whatever documents she's carrying, whatever she gathered. He looked at Ray. There's an abandoned rail warehouse on the south end of Macon Street. The delivery company used to operate out of it. If he's got a vehicle and he needs somewhere private and he knows this area. Noah was already at the door. Hey, Ray said sharply. You are not going there alone. I'm not going to fight him, Noah said. I'm going to make sure the evidence doesn't disappear. He turned. Those are real people's identities, Ray. If Caleb burns whatever Sonia was carrying, those people go back to having nothing. That's not about me. That's not about the wallet or the garage or any of this. Those are people who have been invisible for 8 months because someone stole the proof that they exist. Ray looked at him for a second that lasted a long time. You go nowhere near that warehouse until I know where it is exactly and have people moving, Ray said. You call my phone the second you see that van. You do not go inside without— He's already gone, Carl said from the doorway, looking at his phone. Noah knew the neighborhood because he'd worked a loading job near Macon Street 6 months ago, one of the jobs that had evaporated. He moved fast, cutting through routes that didn't exist on maps, the gap between the storage facility and the old freight yard, the shortcut through the parking structure that let out behind the machine shop on Delaney. His phone was charged now. He had Ray's number ready. He was not being reckless. He was being precise, which was different, and he understood the difference. He spotted the van from half a block away. Cracked right taillight, exactly as he remembered. Parked tight against the loading dock of the warehouse. Facing out, someone who intended to leave quickly. He called Ray. Macon Street warehouse, van's here. I'm outside. Do not go in, Ray said. Noah, how far out are you? 12 minutes. Noah looked at the warehouse. He could hear something from inside, not voices. Not yet, but movement, something heavy being shifted. And then, faint but unmistakable, a woman's voice, not screaming, but tight. The voice of someone managing fear very deliberately. He thought about Sonia Graves, 41 years old, 8 months without identification, who had decided to testify because a 20-year-old she'd never met had refused to run. He went inside. The interior was large and mostly dark, and Noah's eyes adjusted quickly enough to see Caleb near the far wall, where a metal shelving unit had been pulled away to reveal a gap. On the floor near Caleb's feet was a woman Noah had never seen. Sonia. He understood immediately. Small, sitting against the wall, with her arms around a cardboard folder, holding it against her chest the way someone holds something they refuse to surrender. Near the shelving unit was a metal waste bin and the smell of something chemical, something accelerant, which hit Noah's understanding in one cold second. He was going to burn it. He was going to burn all of it. Hey, Noah said loud, no hesitation. Caleb spun. For a moment, he was simply shocked, not frightened. Not yet, just genuinely surprised that Noah Bennett was standing 20 feet away from him inside an abandoned warehouse. Then the surprise collapsed into something uglier. You've got to be kidding me, Caleb said. Let her go, Noah said. He kept his voice flat. She can walk out of here with those documents, and you can get in your van and drive, and you'll have a head start. I'm not trying to trap you. I'm trying to get her out safe. You're not trying to trap me, Caleb repeated, and laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. You drove here alone to tell me that. Ray Mercer is 11 minutes behind me. Leon Briggs called county investigators before he called Ray. They know what you've been doing. All of it, the accounts, the IDs, Frank at Alderman. Noah paused. It's already done. Caleb. The only question right now is what happens in the next 10 minutes. Caleb's face went through something complicated. Noah watched him calculate the distance to the door, the documents in Sonia's arms, the bin with the accelerant, the 12 minutes he didn't have anymore. You couldn't leave it alone, Caleb said. You could have taken that money in the parking lot, and none of this happens. You could have paid me Friday, and none of this happens. You could have run when I put those bottles in your stuff, and none of this happens. He shook his head. People already think the worst about you. You got no address, no ID, no references. I took all of it. You take the money I'm offering you right now, and you disappear, and nobody will care. I'll care, Noah said. That's not enough. It was enough in the parking lot, Noah said. It's enough now. Caleb moved toward the bin. He had a lighter in his hand. Noah had not seen him take it out. It was simply there. Suddenly, the way danger is sometimes simply present before you've tracked its arrival. Sonia made a sound and pressed herself tighter against the wall. Noah moved. Not toward Caleb, between Caleb and the bin, which was a different calculation. If the documents burned, they were gone. If Caleb left, he could still be caught. Math was clear. Caleb grabbed him by the jacket and shoved him sideways, and for a moment, they were close enough that Noah could see how frightened Caleb actually was underneath. Everything, not of Noah, not of Ray, but of what was happening to the version of himself that had always controlled these situations. The version that preyed on people too invisible to fight back. That version was losing, and Caleb knew it. And the knowledge of it was coming out as rage. Noah didn't fight him. He held his ground. He kept himself between Caleb and the bin. The wiring, Sonia said suddenly from the wall. Her voice was strange, urgent, and focused, cutting through everything else. The wiring near the fuel cabinet. Left side, it's sparking. Both of them looked. She was right. A frayed wire running along the baseboard, near an old fuel storage cabinet, was throwing small orange sparks in the dark. Intermittent, the kind of electrical failure that had probably been happening for years and had never mattered because the building was empty. But the accelerant Caleb had brought in it wasn't contained. It had been sitting open, and the vapors from it were heavier than air, and they settled low. Noah understood all of this in about 2 seconds. "Move," he said to Caleb. Not angry, not threatened. Precise. "We need to move right now." Caleb didn't move. He was frozen in that specific way that some people freeze when the emergency is real, when it stops being leverage and starts being physics. Noah grabbed him. He pulled Caleb away from the fuel cabinet and toward the door, and he grabbed Sonia's arm and got her up from the wall, and the three of them were moving toward the loading dock entrance when the frayed wire finally met the vapor concentration, and the flash behind them was hot and white and fast. They came through the door, and the cold air hit them. And Noah kept moving, kept pulling, getting distance from the building. And then there were sirens, 2 different tones, police and fire, coming from 2 directions, and headlights sweeping the lot, and the roar of engines that was different from sirens. Lower and more numerous, the particular sound of many motorcycles arriving together. He stopped. Sonia was coughing beside him. Caleb had gone to his knees on the pavement, not injured, just done the particular collapse of a man who has run out of moves. Ray came through the crowd of arriving vehicles at a pace that looked unhurried but covered ground very fast. He looked at Noah, checked him top to bottom. The way you check something you're afraid might be damaged. And then he looked at Sonia, who was still holding the cardboard folder against her chest, who had not let go of it through any of it. "She's got the documents," Noah said. Ray put his hand on Noah's shoulder. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Behind them, the motorcycles were still arriving. Noah turned and looked, and the count of them, the sheer scale of what had come, stopped him completely. He had known the regional gathering was happening. He hadn't understood, until this moment, what it meant that 350 members had redirected their route when word went out that Noah was in danger. They weren't surrounding anyone. They weren't threatening anyone. They lined the approach to the warehouse in 2 disciplined rows, their engines cutting off one by one into silence, and the silence that replaced that much sound was enormous. Firefighters worked past them. Police moved through them. The riders simply held their ground, and their presence said something that no voice could have said as clearly. Leon appeared beside Ray. He was looking at the cardboard folder in Sonia's arms. "Is that what I think it is?" Sonia finally lowered the folder from her chest. Her arms were shaking. 9 folders, she said. Everything he took. Everything I could find. She looked at Noah. "I went back to the motel after he took me there. When he was on his phone, I found where he kept them." Her voice broke for a second, then steadied. "I wasn't going to let him burn them. 9 people. 9 sets of documentation. 9 lives that had been in that folder. Leon took it from her carefully, the way you take something that has cost a great deal." Caleb was on his feet now, between 2 officers, his face blank in the way that faces go blank when the accounting is finally finished and the total is undeniable. He looked at Noah once. It was a long look. Noah didn't look away from it. "You should have run," Caleb said. Not angry anymore, just worn out. "I don't understand why you didn't run." Noah thought about it for a second. A real second. Not a dramatic pause, actually thought about it. "Because running would have confirmed everything you believed about me," he said. "And everything you believed about me was wrong." The officers moved Caleb toward a vehicle. He didn't resist. Whatever had been holding him up, the certainty that people like Noah had no power, that invisible people stayed invisible, that the system would always absorb the evidence and leave him standing, that thing was gone. And without it, he was just a tired man in borrowed clothes who had finally been accountable for what he was. Sonia sat down on the ground right where she was standing, cross-legged, hugging herself, and she started to cry, not the quiet kind of crying, but the released kind, the kind that has been compressed for a very long time and finally has somewhere to go. Noah crouched beside her. He didn't say it's okay. He didn't say you're safe. He didn't say any of the things people say when they want to skip past the fact that someone has been through something real. He just stayed there. Ray stood behind them both and watched the firefighters work and the police process the scene, and the 350 riders hold their silent corridor, and on his face was an expression that the men who knew him well would recognize, the expression of a man who is thinking about his brother Daniel, who was gone, and about a 20-year-old named Noah Bennett, who had just pulled the man who tried to destroy him out of a burning building rather than leave him there. Not because he had to, not because anyone was watching, because of who he was. The wallet had been returned. The debt had been paid a dozen times over. But Ray was starting to understand that this was never a story about a wallet. It was a story about what a person is made of when everything external has been stripped away and the only thing left is the choice in front of them. And Noah Bennett, with no address and no ID and $9 in his pocket, kept making the same choice every single time. They processed the scene for 3 hours. Noah sat on the back bumper of Leon's truck with a blanket someone had put around his shoulders, he didn't know who. It was just suddenly there, and he watched the machinery of accountability work its way through what Caleb Voss had built. Officers photographed the warehouse. The fire was contained fast. Minor damage to the interior wall, mostly smoke. The white van was impounded, and when they opened the back of it, they found 2 more folders, which Leon cataloged with the precision of a man who had waited a long time to find exactly this. Caleb was put in a county vehicle and driven away without drama, and the absence of drama felt right, felt like the correct ending for someone who had operated through manufactured crises and borrowed authority. Without those tools, he was simply a man in handcuffs with nothing left to say. Sonia Graves sat in a heated vehicle that one of the responding officers had offered her, drinking coffee from a thermos that Maggie had materialized from somewhere. Maggie, who had shown up at some point during the chaos and who nobody had thought to question about it, because Maggie showing up with a thermos when people needed coffee was apparently just a thing that happened. She had stopped crying. She had the specific stillness of someone who has put down something extremely heavy and whose body hasn't fully registered the weight being gone yet. Ray talked to the investigators for a long time. Leon talked to them longer. Noah talked to them briefly and accurately, and they thanked him with the particular courtesy that people extend when they understand they are dealing with someone who has been wronged by a system and have to be careful about how much they acknowledge it out loud. The riders stayed until it was done. All of them. 350 men and women who had rerouted a memorial gathering a ride organized in honor of Daniel Mercer, who had been Ray's brother and who had mattered, and who stood in the cold on a street in an industrial district without complaint, without theater, without making any of it about themselves. When the last official vehicle pulled out of the lot, Ray walked to the front of the corridor and said something to the group that Noah couldn't hear from where he was sitting. Whatever it was, it took about 45 seconds. And when Ray finished, the riders responded with something that wasn't quite a cheer and wasn't quite a salute, but was in the range of both. Then, one by one, the engines started again. Carl appeared beside Noah as the bikes began to move. He was carrying 2 coffees, and he handed one to Noah and stood there drinking the other, watching the riders go. "How are you doing?" Carl asked. He was not a man who asked questions he didn't want the answer to, so Noah gave him an honest one. "I'm not sure yet," Noah said. "I think I'm waiting to figure out what actually happened." Carl nodded. "Smart. The adrenaline makes everything feel like a conclusion. It's not. It's just a pause." Leon said he thinks there are more victims. People Caleb worked over that haven't surfaced yet. "Probably," Carl said. "There usually are, with something like this. Guys who run these schemes count on people feeling too exposed to come forward." He paused. "You coming forward changed that math." Noah looked at his coffee. "I didn't come forward. I returned a wallet." "That's how it started," Carl said. "What came after it was coming forward?" Noah didn't argue. He was too tired to argue, and he suspected Carl was right, which was its own kind of uncomfortable, because it meant that the thing he did done in the parking lot at 5:40 in the morning had been the beginning of something much larger than a single act of honesty. And he wasn't sure how he felt about being the beginning of something. He had spent 8 months trying to survive. He hadn't had the bandwidth to be anyone's beginning. Ray came back from the investigators and looked at the 2 of them and said, "There's a gathering tomorrow night. The Daniel Mercer ride, we're doing it one day behind schedule," which is fine. Daniel would have said a day late is better than not at all. He looked at Noah specifically. "You're coming." It wasn't a question, but Ray left space for Noah to object, which was the thing about Ray that Noah had been learning to recognize. He gave people room to say no, even when he hoped they'd say yes. "I don't need anything from it," Noah said carefully. "I want to be clear about that." "I know you don't," Ray said. "Come anyway." Noah slept 10 hours that night. He woke before the garage opened, lay in the quiet of the room above it, and did something he hadn't done in a long time. He let himself think about the future. Not in the desperate, calculating way he'd been thinking about it for 8 months. Problem stacking on problem, identifying the next failure before it arrived. He let himself think about it openly. What he wanted. Not what was available. Not what was realistic given everything. But what he actually wanted if the landscape were slightly different than it had been. He wanted to finish his degree. He wanted to work with engines, not just maintain them, but understand them, at the level where you could design solutions that didn't exist yet, where you were solving problems nobody had named. He wanted to call Lauren. He had been wanting to call Lauren for 8 months and had not done it because calling her required admitting that his pride had cost them time they couldn't get back, and that admission had felt, for a long time, like too high a price. He lay there and thought about Sonia Graves holding that cardboard folder like it was the only solid thing in the world. He thought about 9 people who had existed in the gap between who they were and what their documents said they were, and how that gap had been manufactured by someone who had understood that invisible people stay invisible when they have no proof they exist. He got up. He went downstairs and started the coffee, and began the morning documentation that Wade had taught him. The log that recorded every vehicle that had been worked on, every component, every discrepancy. He did it with the same attention he'd given his engineering notebooks, because Wade had said once, in his 40 words per hour way, that a garage log was really just an argument evidence for a conclusion you'd reached about a machine, laid out so clearly that anyone who came after you could follow the reasoning. Noah thought that was a good way to think about a lot of things. The gathering that evening was at a facility outside the city that the chapter used for large events, a converted repair barn with enough space to hold several hundred people comfortably, and a sound system that Ray's chapter had apparently upgraded twice in the past 4 years. Noah arrived with Ray and Carl, and the scale of it stopped him at the door. 350 people, easy. Some sitting, some standing, the low roar of several hundred separate conversations producing a collective sound that was surprisingly warm. Food on long tables along one wall. A photograph of Daniel Mercer at the center of a display, near the front, younger than Ray in the picture. Same jaw, same steady eyes, grinning at something off camera. Flowers Noah didn't know the names of, arranged by someone who knew what they were doing. He stood there and felt completely out of place, and completely expected in equal measure, which was a strange combination that he didn't have a word for. Wade appeared at his elbow. Wade, who didn't attend social events, who Noah had never once seen leave the garage voluntarily for anything other than parts. Wade was wearing a clean shirt. "Don't read into this," Wade said. "I go to chapter gatherings. It's in the rules." "I wasn't going to say anything," Noah said. "You were thinking it." Noah didn't deny it. Wade handed him a plate of food and steered him toward a section of the room where several people Noah recognized from the garage were gathered. And for a while, it was just food and conversation and the ordinary, low-level social navigation of being in a room where most people know each other and a few people are learning the landscape. Someone named Deb, who turned out to be Carl's wife, asked Noah about his engineering work with genuine interest and remembered 3 specific things he said, which told him she was the kind of person who listened on purpose. A man named Hector, who rode with a chapter from 2 states over, had done his own automotive engineering certification and spent 20 minutes in conversation with Noah about thermodynamics and high-performance engines. That was the most Noah had felt like himself in a year. He thought, this is what community is, not the word, the thing, the actual practiced reality of people choosing to be in the same space and investing in each other's existence. Then Ray called for attention. The room settled fast, the specific fast of people who are used to Ray's voice carrying weight. Ray stood at the front near Daniel's photograph, and he looked, for a moment, like a man organizing his thoughts in real time rather than delivering something rehearsed, which made what came next land differently than a prepared speech would have. "Most of you were at Macon Street last night," Ray said. "For the ones who weren't, a man named Caleb Voss has been arrested on charges including fraud, theft, coercion, and evidence tampering. 9 people have their identification back. Frank Detmer, a shelter administrator who worked with Voss, has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The county is reviewing at least 3 other cases." He paused. "None of that happens without a 20-year-old kid who found a wallet in a parking lot 8 days ago and made a choice that most people in his position would have made differently." The room was fully quiet now. "I'm going to tell you exactly what happened," Ray said, "because he won't." He told it. He told all of it: the parking lot, the frost, the 6,800, the breakfast at the Silver Spur. He told it plainly and factually, the way Noah had told his own story, and Noah sat in the middle of 350 people and felt the acute discomfort of being accurately described, which is one of the stranger experiences available to a human being. He had spent 8 months being misread, misclassified, reduced. Being read correctly by someone who gave a full account of what they saw was almost harder. "He returned a wallet," Ray said. "He could have kept the money and nobody would have known. Instead, he walked into a room of 6 strangers who could have reacted badly. And he put the wallet on the table and explained why." Ray stopped. "Then he refused charity. Then he refused to involve us in revenge. Then he found himself framed, expelled, stripped of everything he owned. And still he refused to run. Then he went into a building that was about to catch fire to make sure evidence that belonged to 9 people he had never met didn't get destroyed." Ray looked out at the room. "And then he pulled the man who caused all of it out of the smoke." Someone in the room said something low, disbelieving. Another person said something else. Ray let it run for a moment, then continued. "He told me the night I picked him up from Maggie's diner that he wanted the truth to matter, even when the person telling it doesn't have an address." He paused. "I want to talk about that, because it's easy to be honest when you're comfortable. It's easy to have principles when the cost of them is low. What Noah did, what he kept doing, over and over, when the cost kept going up, that's not a good day decision. That's character. That's who someone is." The room had the specific silence of people holding something. "My brother Daniel," Ray said, and his voice changed, not breaking. just different in texture, older somehow, used to say that dignity is not given. It's practiced. You practice it in the small decisions, when nobody's watching, when keeping it costs you something real. And then, if you practice it long enough, it becomes what you are instead of what you're trying to be. He looked at Daniel's photograph for a second. Noah Bennett has been practicing dignity in conditions that would have broken most of us. Tonight, we're going to tell him what that means to this chapter, to these 350 people, and to the 9 people whose lives are different today because of what he chose to do in a parking lot at 5:40 in the morning. He looked at Noah directly. "Come up here," Ray said. Noah didn't move for a second. Then Carl, sitting next to him, said very quietly, "Get up, kid," and Noah got up. He stood at the front of the room next to Ray, and he had no script and no prepared response, and he was aware of 350 people looking at him with an attention that was entirely kind and entirely overwhelming. Ray said, "The chapter has prepared something. And before you say anything about not needing it or not wanting it," he held up a hand. "I know. You're going to let me finish before you respond." Noah closed his mouth. What came next was not theatrical. It was not a ceremony or a performance. It was 350 people who had talked among themselves. Leon later told Noah it had started the night at the warehouse. Messages going through the chapter network while they were still standing in that corridor and who had arrived at a collective decision about what was actually useful. Ray laid it out the way a man lays out a plan, clear, sequential, without flourish. A full year of housing, a room in a house 2 blocks from the garage, safe neighborhood. Month to month after that first year, so Noah wasn't beholden to a timeline. Paid employment at Mercer Roadside Recovery, with formal mechanic certification through a program the chapter had relationships with. Legal assistance to replace his identification and clear the false records Caleb had generated. Tuition assistance, not a full ride, a supplement, enough to make the engineering program financially possible without the scholarship he'd lost. A truck secondhand, mid-90s Chevy, rebuilt engine. Wade had done it himself over the past 2 days, which explained why Wade had been at the garage until midnight the night before and had said nothing about it. Tools, winter gear, groceries enough to start, a modest emergency fund, and a referral to a counseling service that worked specifically with people navigating re-entry after housing instability, and a parallel service that helped with family mediation. Because Ray had heard Noah say Lauren's name twice and understood, without being told what it meant, that he hadn't said more. The room was quiet through all of it. Noah stood there and felt the specific weight of generosity that is given without theater, which is heavier than the theatrical kind because it has no performance to push against. "No," he said. Ray looked at him. "I need a minute," Noah said. His voice was steady, but the steadiness was costing him. "I need to say something before I answer." Ray nodded. Noah looked out at the room. He had not planned to speak. He had no idea what he was going to say until he said it. "I know what this looks like," he said. "To me, standing here, it looks like a reward for returning the wallet. And I need to be honest with you, if that's what it is, I can't accept it. Because I didn't return it for a reward. I returned it because I couldn't live inside the version of myself that didn't. And if you pay me for it, you change what it was." He stopped. "I don't want it to be a transaction. It's the one thing I have from the last 8 months that nobody can take from me. And if I sell it, even to good people for good reasons, I don't have it anymore." The room was completely still. Ray said carefully, "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what it is," Noah said honestly. "That's why I needed a minute." Ray stepped slightly closer. He spoke quietly enough that it was still audible, but felt more direct, like a real conversation inside the larger one. "You didn't sell us your integrity. You reminded 350 people what integrity is supposed to cost. The cost, Noah, the actual cost of it. What you gave up. What you kept choosing to give up." He paused. "We're not buying your future. We're saying we saw it, and we want to help you reach it. There's a difference between those two things." Noah looked at him for a long moment. "Ray," he said, "my mother used to say, you can measure a person by what they do when the stakes are private. when nobody's watching, when the choice doesn't come with an audience. He stopped. I did it because she raised me too. I'd already decided who I was. You didn't teach me that. He paused. But I think I've been so committed to not needing anything that I turned it into a wall. And I think she would have had something specific to say about that too. Ray waited. I'll accept it, Noah said. On one condition. The room listened. Some of what's been collected, I don't know how much. Whatever the chapter decides is right goes toward an emergency fund. Not for me. For people who are trying to get out of the situation I was in. Replacement ID, shelter transition, school re-enrollment. The specific gaps that nobody fills because they're too small for programs and too large for individuals. He looked at Ray. Sonia Graves waited 8 months for someone to see her. I want there to be something in place so the next person doesn't wait that long. The room didn't erupt. It didn't applaud or cheer or do the things rooms do in movies when someone says something that deserves a response. It did something quieter and realer. It breathed. 350 people drew breath at the same moment in a way that was collective and unmistakable, and the sound of it was enormous. Carl was the first person to speak. He said, loud enough to carry, I'll match the first 1,000 out of my own pocket. Someone else called out a number. Then another person. It moved through the room fast and unselfconsciously, people calling amounts the way people call bids when they trust the cause. And Leon was already writing, already tracking, already building the structure of the thing in real time, because that was what Leon did. Ray looked at Noah. Noah said, what do we call it? Ray thought for a moment. He looked at Daniel's photograph. He said, the Open Road Fund. Noah turned that over. A second route forward, not a handout. A road that was open, not a door that someone held for you. That works, he said. Afterward, when the formal part of the evening had dissolved back into food and conversation, and the specific warmth of a large group of people who have shared something real, Noah found himself standing alone near Daniel's photograph. He looked at it for a long time, the grin, the same jaw as Ray, the motorcycle behind him. He thought about the folded photo he'd found in the wallet. Always. The words someone had written under the date. Ray appeared beside him, a cup of coffee in each hand, and offered one without making anything of it. Tell me about him, Noah said. Ray was quiet for a moment. Then he said, he was 3 years older than me. When I came back from the service, I was not in a good place. Not dangerous, just lost. Couldn't get traction anywhere. Couldn't figure out how to be a civilian again, being something else for 6 years. He paused. Daniel had a shop by then. Small place, auto repair. He gave me work. Not charity, actual work, specific responsibilities, expectations. He didn't treat me like I was broken. He treated me like someone who had gotten temporarily turned around and needed a road back. Ray looked at the photograph. Took me 2 years to get fully back. 2 years of that shop. By the end of it, I had enough to start Mercer roadside recovery and enough sense to know that the way you help someone isn't by doing everything for them. It's by standing next to them while they do it themselves. Noah looked at the photograph. That's why you gave me the card instead of cash. That's why I gave you the card instead of cash, Ray said. And the money in the wallet, Noah said. The memorial fund. For the ride. For Daniel. Ray nodded. He's been gone 14 months. It was the first thing I organized entirely on my own, without him to tell me I was overcomplicating it. He stopped. He would have liked you. Noah didn't say anything for a moment. He thought about his mother and about Daniel Mercer and about how many threads of that kind ran through the world, person to person, lesson to lesson, the things people carry forward from those they've lost. The truck, Noah said. Wade built the engine. Wade was Daniel's apprentice, Ray said. 20 years ago. Worked for him for 6 years before he came to me. He paused. He doesn't say much about it. He doesn't say much about anything. He said you're the best instinct mechanic he's worked with in 15 years, Ray said, which is approximately the highest compliment Wade Holloway has given anyone since 2009. Noah looked at his coffee. He felt something move in his chest, not the dramatic kind of feeling, not the cinematic swell of a life turning around, something smaller and more accurate. The feeling of a door that had been closed for a long time opening far enough to let light through. I need to call my sister, he said. I know, Ray said. Use my phone if yours needs charging. It's charged, Noah said. I've just been afraid. I know that too, Ray said. Do it anyway. That's pretty much all there is to it. Noah nodded. He stood there another moment, looking at Daniel's photograph, at the grin, at the motorcycle, at the word always written under a date in someone's careful hand. He thought about all the things that move forward through people integrity, generosity, the specific knowledge that asking for a door is not the same as asking to be carried through it. He thought about Sonia Graves, whose 9 folders were now with the county investigators, whose documentation would be restored within the week, who had sat on the floor of an abandoned warehouse and refused to let go of what belonged to other people. He thought about the 9 people whose names were in those folders, who didn't know yet that their lives were about to be returned to them. He thought about his mother, who had raised him in a 2-bedroom apartment that was never quite warm enough in January, who had worked double shifts in a hospital laundry and had never once stopped practicing dignity, and who had made sure that her son understood the difference between what the world takes from you and what you give away yourself. That he set down his coffee cup. He took out his phone. He found Lauren's number still there, unchanged, the same contact photo from 3 years ago. Lauren making a ridiculous face at a holiday dinner that felt like it had happened in another person's life, and he pressed call before he could find another reason not to. It rang 3 times, then Noah. Not a question. Just his name in his sister's voice. And in it, he heard everything. She hadn't been saying N for 8 months, the worry she hadn't known what to do with. The frustration that had been love in a form he hadn't let himself receive. Hey, he said. His voice broke slightly on the single syllable. He let it. I'm okay. I'm actually okay, and I'm sorry I didn't call. Lauren was quiet for a second. When she spoke again, he could hear her working to keep her voice even and not quite managing it. Where are you? I'm at a gathering, he said. It's a long story. I'll tell you the whole thing. He paused. I found a wallet. Lauren drove from Portland in 11 hours. She didn't tell Noah she was coming. She texted him once. At 2 in the morning, 3 words, I'm on my way. He read it sitting on the cot in the room above the garage, phone in both hands, and he sat with those 4 words for a long time before he put the phone down and tried to sleep and mostly failed at it. She arrived at the garage just after 9 the following morning, while Noah was under the Chevy truck that Wade had rebuilt his truck, though it still felt strange to apply that word to something doing a final inspection of the brake system because Wade had built the engine and Noah trusted Wade's engine worked completely, but he wanted to know every component of the vehicle himself before he drove it. He heard the car pull in. He heard Wade say something brief. He heard a woman's voice respond. He rolled out from under the truck. Lauren Bennett was 31 years old, and she looked like their mother in the specific way that siblings sometimes carry a parent's features without either of them choosing it. Same dark eyes, same set to the jaw, same way of holding herself when she was feeling something strongly that communicated control without concealing the feeling underneath. She was stand 10 feet away looking at him, and she was wearing a jacket that was not warm enough for the weather, and she had clearly been driving since before midnight, and her eyes were red in a way that she was not going to mention. Noah got to his feet. They looked at each other for a moment. Then Lauren crossed the distance and put her arms around him. And he let her, and he put his arms around her, and neither of them said anything for a long time, because some conversations cannot begin in words. They have to begin in the physical reality of 2 people who have been too far apart finally being close enough to breathe the same air. When they separated, Lauren looked at his face carefully. The way you look at something you've been worried about, checking for damage. You look terrible, she said. I've had a month, he said. You look better than I expected, she corrected herself, more honestly considering. I've had a week, he said. She looked around the garage at Wade, who had returned to his work with the specific courtesy of pretending not to be present, at the trucks and motorcycles in various states of repair, at the stairs leading to the room above. "Show me," she said. He showed her. He told her everything. Not the compressed version. Not the version he'd given Ray at the Silver Spur or the investigators in Ray's office, the real version, with the parts he'd edited out of other tellings because they required admitting things that were harder than facts. He told her about the engineering program and the financial aid and the specific sequence of decisions he'd made not after their mother died that had been driven more by pride than by strategy. He told her about the 3 jobs and the apartment and the shelter and the $7 and the dead phone. He told her about finding the wallet and standing in the cold parking lot and the $50 bill and putting it back. She listened without interrupting, which took visible effort at certain points, particularly the part about the shelter and the cold and the $7. Her hands were in her lap, and she was very still in the way that people are still when they're working hard not to react. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You could have called me. I know. 8 months ago. Before the shelter. Before the engineering program fell apart. You could have called me and said, 'Lauren, I need help.'" "I know," he said again. "Why didn't you?" He looked at her directly. "Because calling you meant admitting I couldn't hold it together without help. And I had spent 2 years telling myself that I could, that I was handling it, that the situation was hard, but I was on top of it." He paused. "And I was wrong. And by the time I knew I was wrong, I had been wrong for so long that explaining it felt like more than I could do." Lauren looked at him. Her expression was not anger, it was something more complicated. The face of someone working through the gap between what they wanted to feel and what they actually felt. "I called you 14 times. She said, "I know. I left voicemails. I know. I didn't know if you were alive. Noah." He stopped. "I'm sorry. Not the reflexive kind of sorry, the kind that actually costs something. I was wrong to shut you out and it hurt you, and I can't give those 8 months back. And I know that." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "The counseling service Ray mentioned. You're going to use it." "Yes, family sessions. Both of us." He looked at her. "You'd come here for that?" "I'm already here," she said. "I drove 11 hours. Yes, I'll come for that." Something in Noah's chest moved. Not broke, moved. Shifted into a different position, one that had more room in it. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. She reached over and took his hand and held it for a second. The way she used to when they were kids and one of them had been scared of something. Then she let go and sat up straighter and said, in a completely different tone, "Now show me this truck Wade built." The Open Road Fund was officially registered within the month. Leon handled the paperwork with the systematic thoroughness of a man who had spent 22 years building a case that needed to hold up under scrutiny. And the result was a structure that was clean and auditable and designed to last. Noah was listed as the coordinator, not the director, not the founder. The coordinator, which was the title he insisted on because director implied hierarchy and founder implied the thing had been his idea, and he wanted it to be clear from the beginning that the idea had been the chapters, the money had been the chapters, and his job was to make sure it went where it was supposed to go and that it got there efficiently. The fund had one focus, the specific gap between crisis and stability. Not emergency housing itself, there were programs for that, inadequate but present. Not food, not clothing, not general welfare. The gap, the documentation, the enrollment fees, the application costs, the things that cost between $40 and $300 and blocked people from accessing everything else. The things that fell below the threshold for institutional assistance and above the threshold for individual charity. Noah understood this gap from the inside, from having lived in it, and he designed the fund's criteria accordingly. Sonia Graves was the first person he had called. She picked up on the second ring. She had her identification back. Leon had shepherded the process personally, and the county had moved with unusual speed on it, which Ray attributed to Leon knowing exactly which supervisor to call and what to say. She had secured a room at a transitional housing facility on the east side. She had a job interview scheduled for the following Tuesday. "I want to ask you something," Noah said. "And you can absolutely say no." She waited. The fund needs someone who can work intake. Talk to people who are applying, understand their situations, help them figure out what they actually need versus what they think they need. It's part-time to start. It pays. He paused. I thought of you because you know what the gap feels like from the inside, and because you held on to those folders in a burning building. Sonia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I wasn't going to let him burn them. I know, Noah said. That's why I called you. She said yes. Noah started the engineering program in the spring semester. Not full-time, he was working at the garage 4 days a week, coordinating the fund in the evenings and sleeping in the house 2 blocks from Mercer roadside that the chapter had arranged. The course load was 2 classes, which felt modest on paper and significant in practice, because returning to academic work after a year of survival mode required a recalibration of attention that he hadn't anticipated. The knowledge was there. Wade had confirmed that the knowledge was there, in the bluntest possible terms, but the capacity to sit still with it in a formal setting and produce it on demand in the ways the program required was a muscle that had gotten uneven. He worked at it the way he worked at everything, methodically, with documentation. His engineering professor was a woman named Dr. Vasquez, who had the particular patience of someone who had taught long enough to understand that the standard trajectory, 18 to 22, continuous enrollment, no interruptions, was not the only valid trajectory, and who asked Noah in their first meeting what he had been doing for the year he'd been out of school. He gave her the short version. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, that's a significant amount of practical diagnostic experience. I'm going to ask you to write a paper this semester on a maintenance problem you've actually solved. Not a textbook problem, a real one. He wrote about the Road King, the cracked primary chain tension that everyone else had been chasing as an oil leak. He wrote about the diagnostic process, the reasoning, the way the downstream symptoms had been obscuring the upstream cause. He wrote about the gap between what a problem presents as and what it actually is, and how closing that gap requires not just technical knowledge, but the discipline to stop treating your first hypothesis as a conclusion. Dr. Vasquez gave it back to him with a note at the top. This is how engineers think. Keep going. He kept going. 3 months into the spring semester, Leon called him on a Tuesday afternoon with news that Noah had not been expecting. Frank Detmer pled guilty, Leon said, this morning. Cooperation agreement. He's giving the county everything about Caleb's operation in exchange for a reduced sentence. The additional victims are going to be identified. He paused. There are 16 confirmed now, possibly more. Noah sat down. He was in the garage office, between tasks, and he sat down in Wade's chair. Wade was not there, which was the only reason Noah would have sat in it and let that number land. 16 people. 16 people who had been systematically made invisible by a man who understood that the least powerful people in a system have the least ability to fight back, and who had treated that understanding not as a moral problem, but as a business model. The county is setting up a coordination process for restoration of documents, Leon continued. They want to partner with organizations that have existing relationships with the affected population. I told them about the Open Road Fund. Noah was quiet for a moment. How many of the 16 are in immediate need? 11. The other 5 have partial documentation, already driver's licenses but no social security replacement, that kind of thing. 11 have nothing usable. Call Sonia, Noah said. She'll know how to prioritize the intake. And tell the county we can start this week. He heard Leon do something that was almost a laugh short, quiet, the laugh of a man who doesn't do it often. You know, Ray said you'd say something like that. What did Ray say exactly? He said you'd spend about 4 seconds absorbing the information and then ask what needed to be done next. Noah looked at the wall. 4 seconds seems about right. He also said you remind him of Daniel, Leon said, and then was quiet for a moment, and Noah understood that quiet and let it be what it was. Tell the county we'll start this week, Noah said again, more gently. The second twist, the one that changed how Noah understood everything that had come before, arrived on a Saturday in late spring through a conversation he hadn't expected to have. Ray came to the garage that morning not to work but to talk, which was unusual enough that Noah read it in the way Ray came through the door. He sat across from Noah at the workbench, and he had his coffee, and he had the look of a man who has been deciding for a while whether to say something and has finally decided. I want to tell you about the wallet, Ray said. The real reason it had that much cash in it. Noah looked at him. You said it was for Daniel's memorial ride. That's true. It was for the ride, Ray turned his coffee cup in his hands. But there's a part I didn't tell you. The reason I was carrying it in cash, why I had it on me that night, why I was stupid enough to leave it in my jacket instead of in the safe at the garage. He stopped. A week before I parked that bike at the Silver Spur, I got news that the ride permit had been denied. Liability issue, the city said. Administrative problem. I'd been fighting it for 2 weeks and I was losing, and the night before, you found the wallet. I had decided quietly, privately, in the specific way you decide things you don't want to admit to anyone that I was going to cancel the ride. Cancel the whole thing. Tell the chapter it wasn't possible and find another way to honor Daniel and let the money sit in the fund until I figured out what else to do with it. Noah waited. I put the wallet in my jacket pocket that night because I was going back to the garage to put the money in the safe. I got to the Silver Spur for coffee first. Got distracted talking to Carl about the permit, sat down at that table, and when I stood up, Ray stopped. I didn't notice it was gone until you walked in. You would have canceled the ride, Noah said. I had already decided to. In my head, it was done. I was looking for the words to tell the chapter. He looked at Noah, and then a 20-year-old kid in a split glove walked into the diner and put the wallet on the table and said nobody saw me find it, but I would have known what I did. He paused, and I sat there looking at that wallet and thinking Daniel would not have canceled the ride. Daniel would have found another way. Daniel would have kept moving forward even when it stopped making practical sense. He met Noah's eyes. You walking in with that wallet was the most specific possible message I could have received at that particular moment. I don't know what you believe about that kind of thing, but I know what it was for me. Noah was quiet for a long moment. The ride happened, he said finally. The ride happened. We got the permit sorted. Carl called in a favor. It took 3 days, and because it happened, 350 people were already together and already on the road when you needed them at Macon Street. Ray paused. If you'd kept the money, the ride doesn't happen. Or it happens differently, smaller, later, without the momentum. The chapter isn't together the way they were. And I don't know what that night at the warehouse looks like without 350 people showing up. Noah thought about the corridor they'd formed, the engines cutting off into silence. The way the silence had been enormous. He thought about Caleb's face in that silence, not frightened of the riders, but suddenly confronted with a scale of human connection he hadn't believed existed for people like Noah, and the confrontation breaking something in him. You didn't know any of that when you gave me the card, Noah said. No, Ray said. I gave you the card because you deserved a door. What happened after that? He shook his head. That was you. Noah. I gave you a card with a phone number. You did everything else. Noah looked at his hands. He thought about his mother's voice in a cold parking lot at 5:40 in the morning. So present in his memory that it was almost audible. He thought about a $50 bill he held for about 4 seconds before putting back. Did Daniel ever do something like this? He asked. Give someone a card, a door? Ray smiled real. Unguarded, the specific smile of someone accessing a good memory. He did it constantly. He'd deny it if you called it charity. He called it recognizing talent and making sure it didn't go to waste. He paused. He gave me a job and 2 years of practical rebuilding when I came back from the service a mess. He gave Wade a full apprenticeship when Wade was 17 and living out of his car. He gave Leon a reference for the investigator program when Leon couldn't get anyone in the department to take him seriously. Ray looked at his coffee. There are about a dozen people walking around in this city right now who would tell you that a conversation with Daniel Mercer changed their trajectory. He never collected the debt. He just expected you to pass it forward when the moment came. Noah understood then, fully, in the way that understanding sometimes arrives, not gradually, but all at once. like a mechanism clicking into place. This was not a story about a wallet. It had never been a story about a wallet. The wallet was a moment, a test, a door, and the door opened onto something that had been moving for decades. Person to person, mentor to student to stranger, Daniel to Ray to Wade to Leon to Noah, and now, through Noah to Sonia, and to 16 people whose names he was learning one at a time, and to whoever came after them. He had not started this story. He had entered it. And his job, the real job, the one that had nothing to do with garage logs or engineering credits or fund applications, was to keep it moving. I'm going to pass it forward, Noah said. I know, Ray said. You already are. The day that closed the year, the first annual open road charity ride, organized jointly by the chapter and the fund, arrived on a Saturday that started cold and warmed slowly, the way the best days do. Noah was at the garage by 6. Not because he had to be. Wade was handling the mechanical checks on the vehicles participating in the ride, and Sonia had coordinated the logistics of the community event that would follow. And Lauren, who had been in the city for 3 days, was at the fund's office on Fletcher Street, helping set up the intake station where people could come and talk to someone about documentation and housing and school enrollment. The whole structure was running. It didn't need Noah at 6 in the morning to keep running. He was there because this was where it had started. Not the diner, the garage. The room above it. The first morning, Wade knocking on the door and asking about wet sump and dry sump lubrication systems. This was where he had understood, for the first time in a year, that he was being asked not what he needed, but what he knew. He stood in the garage and let himself feel the weight of the year. Not the bad weight, not the compressed, desperate weight of 8 months of survival, the other kind, the weight of something that had grown, the Road King, with the cracked tensioner he'd fixed on the first morning. The documentation logs. The engineering notes rebuilding themselves from memory in the margins of his school notebooks. Lauren's voice on the phone, I'm on my way. Sonia saying I wasn't going to let him burn them. Ray saying you didn't sell us your integrity. Wade came in at 6:15 and looked at Noah standing in the middle of the garage and said, without preamble, you're in my way. Wade, there's coffee. Wade moved past him toward the truck he was checking. And Dr. Vasquez called the shop phone last night. Said to tell you the paper you submitted for the summer intensive got accepted for the department review. Whatever that means. Noah went still. She called the shop phone, didn't have your cell. Said you'd know what it was about. Wade was already under the hood. Is it good news? It means the paper goes in front of the full engineering faculty, Noah said, for potential publication in the departmental journal. He paused. The one about the Road King. Wade was quiet for a moment. Then, from under the hood, tell her she can mention the bike if she wants. I rebuilt the engine. Noah almost laughed. It came out as something between a laugh and a breath. I'll tell her, he said. By 10 o'clock, the parking lot behind the Silver Spur Diner had more motorcycles in it than it had ever held. The ride was staging there, Ray's choice. And Noah understood why without being told. It was the same parking lot, the same east corner where a wallet had been sitting under a frost-covered bike at 5:40 in the morning, and a 20-year-old with $7 and a dead phone had made a decision that nobody saw. Noah stood near the corner and looked at the spot. There was nothing remarkable about it. Cold pavement, a parking stripe, the faint stain where motor oil had once dripped from a bike that wasn't there anymore. The world had no way of marking the places where private choices happen. It just moved on. And the choice moved with it, underground, through people, forward. He heard someone behind him. He turned. A young woman was standing at the edge of the parking lot, maybe 19 or 20, wearing clothes that had been worn too long, holding something against her chest with both arms. She was watching the motorcycles with an expression that was trying to be neutral, but was actually frightened. And she was deciding something. He could see the decision-making in her posture, the held breath of someone at a threshold. She had a wallet in her hands. Not his wallet, not Ray's wallet, her own find, her own parking lot moment, because the world generates these moments constantly, and most of the time they vanish without anyone knowing they happened. Noah walked toward her. Not fast, not with authority, just toward her. The way you move towards someone who needs to know they've been seen. Hey, he said. He kept his voice easy, okay? She looked at him. Up close, she was younger than he'd thought, with the specific exhaustion behind her eyes that he recognized not as tiredness, but as the accumulated weight of too many days of figuring out the basics. I found this, she said. She held out the wallet, near one of the bikes. I was going to, I don't know. She stopped. I thought about keeping it. I need to be honest. I thought about it for a while. How long? Noah said. She blinked. What? How long did you think about it? She looked at him like she wasn't sure if he was judging her. Maybe 5 minutes, 10? I don't know. It was a long time, Noah nodded slowly. And then you didn't keep it. I don't know what to do with it, she said. I don't know who it belongs to. I don't know these people. She gestured at the bikes, the riders, the organized chaos of 350 people preparing for a memorial ride. I don't know if I should just leave it somewhere. Or, we'll find who it belongs to, Noah said. That's easy. I know most of these people. He paused. What's your name? She hesitated. The hesitation of someone who has learned that giving their name is sometimes the beginning of a process they can't control. He recognized that too. Maya, she said finally. Maya, I'm Noah. Have you eaten today? She looked at him for a moment. Then she shook her head. Okay, he said, come inside. Maggie's is right there. You've already made the hardest choice, I can see that. You stood in a parking lot for 10 minutes with something that wasn't yours and you didn't take it. He paused. That matters, even if you're the only one who knows it. Actually, he stopped. Especially if you're the only one who knows it. Her face did something complicated. How would you know which choice was the hardest? Noah looked at her for a second. He thought about what to say and then decided to just say the true thing. Because that was the only currency he had ever actually trusted. "'Cause I stood in this parking lot about a year ago," he said. Same situation, same decision. Took me about 4 seconds. He paused. Yours took 10 minutes and you still made the right one. That's actually harder. She stared at him. You're serious. Come inside, he said. I'll buy you breakfast and you can decide what you want to do next. Nobody's going to push you into anything. She looked at the wallet in her hands. She looked at the diner. She looked at Noah. Okay, she said. They walked into the Silver Spur together. Maggie looked up from the counter and saw Noah, and then saw the girl beside him, the worn jacket, the held wallet, the particular posture of someone who had been managing too much alone, and her expression did something that required no translation. She held up 2 fingers. 2 coffees. Coming right up. Noah sat across from Maya and told her about the Open Road Fund, about Sonia, about the intake process, about what was available for someone in the specific gap between crisis and stability. He told her about the documentation process and the housing transition program and the school re-enrollment pathway. He told her about the 16 people whose identities had been restored. He told her, carefully and without pressure, that none of it required her to be a particular kind of person, or to have made perfect decisions, or to have a story that made sense in a straight line. He did not tell her his own story. Not yet. That could wait until she was ready to hear it, until it would be useful rather than just personal. Maggie brought coffee and, without being asked, brought food, eggs, toast, orange juice. She set it down and said nothing and went back to the counter. Maya looked at the food. She looked at Noah. Why are you doing this? Noah thought about Ray's card in his shirt pocket a year ago and the promise he'd made to himself that he would never use it, and how wrong he'd been about what that promise meant. Someone did it for me, he said simply, and before that, someone did it for him. And before that, he shook his head. I don't know how far back it goes. Pretty far, I think. Outside, the motorcycles were starting their engines. The sound built the way it always built, individual notes joining into something collective, something that was more than the sum of its parts, a sound that you felt in your chest before you heard it with your ears. 350 engines finding the same rhythm. Maya turned toward the window. Her eyes went wide. What is that? She said. A memorial ride, Noah said, for a man named Daniel Mercer. He spent his life giving people working doors instead of closed ones. He paused. The ride is also a fundraiser for people who are trying to get back to stable ground. She turned back to Noah. Something had shifted in her face, not resolution yet. Not the clean ending of a thing, but the beginning of the willingness to believe that what came next could be different from what came before. He recognized that too, that particular fragile opening. Eat, he said, then we'll talk. She ate. Outside, the riders moved out of the parking lot in formation, Ray at the front, Carl to his right, Wade somewhere in the middle, because Wade said formation riding was theatrical but showed up every year anyway. Leon near the back, because Leon said someone had to watch the rear. 350 people carrying a dead man's name down the open road, paying a debt that had been moving forward for decades and would keep moving long after any of them were gone. Noah watched them through the window and felt something settle in him, not the satisfaction of a completed project, but the steadiness of someone who has found the work they're supposed to do and understands that the work doesn't end. It just continues. Person to person, door to door, choice to choice, in parking lots and diners and warehouses and garage rooms, in moments nobody witnesses and moments witnessed by hundreds, in the small private decisions that nobody marks and nobody records and that turn out, in the long run, to be the entire architecture of a life. He turned back to Maya. She had finished the eggs. She was holding the coffee cup in both hands, and some of the held tension had gone out of her shoulders, and she was looking at Noah with the expression of someone who is beginning to understand that the next part of the story doesn't have to look like the last part. Okay, she said, tell me about this fund. And Noah Bennett, apprentice mechanic, engineering student, coordinator of the Open Road Fund, son of Patricia Bennett, who had worked double shifts in a hospital laundry and raised 2 children in an apartment that was never quite warm enough, and had taught them both that poverty can take your comfort and your time and your sleep, but it cannot take your character unless you hand it over. Noah Bennett leaned forward and told her, because a person's worth is not measured by what they own, where they sleep, or what the world has decided to call them. Integrity is not a gesture made for an audience. It is a private act performed in the dark when the cost is real and the reward is invisible. And it is the only thing that, once chosen, cannot be taken away. And compassion without action is just sentiment, but compassion that opens a door, builds a fund, restores a name, sits beside a frightened stranger in a diner, and says you already made the hardest choice. That is how one good decision becomes 100, and 100 becomes 1,000, and a wallet found in a cold parking lot becomes the first note of something that keeps playing long after the hand that struck it has moved on. The wallet had changed hands only once, but what it awakened never stopped traveling.